And once again, it is Friday night, and that means it's college football night, especially this time of year. Right here in the corner, it's myself and Randy. We're going to rip it down for you game by game for the ones that matter. We're getting late in the year. Usually, this is Cupcake week, but that might be a little bit different this year with the way things are rolling and the 12 teams that are trying to fight for spots. It's a lot of games are more relevant. So,
Oh yeah.
lots of fun to talk about, starting with last week as Randy exits stage right on the screen.
I had something on my way there. Now we're set.
All right. So last week, what do you remember about last week?
Well, one of the biggest things I remember, and I think me and you chatted about it a little bit, was, we really got to start giving Colorado some credit. I mean, they have really turned things around there. Like you were saying before, we keep waiting for them to get beat, keep waiting for them to get beat, and they keep taking care of business, and they keep doing it more and more impressively each week. So, I mean, that was one of the biggest things. And then, of course, we had Tennessee, Georgia, which looked like an absolute fantastic game at halftime. And then the second half, and I've said this before, that I believe Kirby Smart is the absolute best coach at making adjustments at halftime. We see it week after week that they make the adjustments to get things done, and then that's the way it worked out in that game also.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of interesting storylines in the SEC when it comes to getting in the 12-team playoff and getting to the final game, which I don't think right now anybody's got it locked in. But with what's left on the schedule, the meat, if you will, or lack of thereof, depending on who you're talking about, definitely Texas and Texas A&M got the inside track to get to that game, winning you're in kind of a thing. But somebody slips up, and it could be pretty interesting. And I think Texas is hosting Kentucky this week, so
Right.
that's very interesting from their standpoint. I wanted to get your take on Texas. I looked at Texas schedule, and I look at the games they've played this year and who they've beat and who they haven't beat, and their best win is Vanderbilt when it comes to overall ranking and wins and losses, with Michigan, I think, being right behind that. But with
Right.
Vanderbilt, not that Vanderbilt's better than they have been in many years, but they're certainly not elite in the SEC. Texas losing to Georgia, right? They got boat raced by them,
Yep.
and then and they haven't. They kind of haven't played the teams like some of the other teams in the SEC has, which kind of makes me. I mean, if they don't win or even get into the SEC championship game, like if they don't get into it, I guess somehow I don't know if that means they have to take a second loss because they have the inside track. I just wonder how strong they're going to look against maybe a Colorado who gets all the way to the end and maybe loses. It'll be three losses for them, but have they played a tougher schedule or a one loss Penn State that doesn't play for a championship? There's so many things to look at how things all lay out. But I think Texas, to me, it seems like is a little bit weaker on the scheduling than some of the other SEC teams like a Georgia who. I mean, Georgia, I think, has the number one schedule in the entire
Mhm.
land of, for FBS. I mean, nobody's played a tougher schedule, so they got two losses. But look who they've played and look who they've beat and how they looked in those games. And Carson Beck definitely last week looked like he really had his best game of the year.
Right. Yeah, and you're talking about the strength of schedule, and not just in the SEC. If you look at the top 12 teams, and you look at strength of schedule, and there's just there seems to be a huge difference with a lot of those teams that are ranked even basically in the top 7 or 8. Um, you got, I mean, Indiana's in there. They're like 106th on
Yeah,
the strength of schedule thing. I mean, in Texas is that they're not the strength of schedule that we've seen some of the other SEC teams have, and
right.
and you've mentioned this before. I mean, it's not really their fault. They're taking care of the business that's in front of them, but it really makes you wonder what's going to happen. One, how's the committee going to look at this? I mean, right now they're putting them up there, but I mean, they also got to know that these big games are coming up,
Yeah.
and we've talked about it before. The almighty dollar speaks whenever they can say number two against number four.
Yeah.
Number one verse two. Um, so I mean, when it all gets said and done, it's going to be real interesting of which teams are actually that they're still going to keep up there with that strength of schedule thing. And like I said, I mean, there's three or four teams that are ranked up there that their strength of schedule is I mean, way down compared to a lot of the other teams that are in that same group.
Yeah. I'm a little bullish on Indiana, but I know when you break down their schedule, they just haven't really played anybody yet. Again, they not their fault necessarily. One thing I did hear today, which I thought was interesting, they didn't really specify the timelines, but Indiana was scheduled to play Louisville this year, and what they said was Indiana backed out of the game and replaced it with an FCS team. So, and who knows when? I don't know if that was before Signetti or I don't know how that all went down. I want to say Signetti probably wouldn't have done that. He doesn't sound like he's afraid of anybody, so it must have happened before he got there. That would have been a nice game to have on their schedule. Looking at it, Louisville would have been the best team they would have played until tomorrow. But Indiana does have everything in front of them. And I do think they're. I mean, the way they just beaten the pants off everybody except for Michigan. And they've played really well. Most people, talking heads, believe if they can stay within 10 points,
Yeah.
10 to 14 points of Ohio State tomorrow, and have it be a decent, competitive game, that they shouldn't have a problem getting in. I kind of agree. I mean, if you get boat raced, you get boat raced. But usually when you get boat raced, you hope you have other games that you can stack up, and they just don't have games that can stack up that look great. It's going to be hard to put a one-loss Indiana team who, let's say, gets destroyed by Ohio State, by 20 points or whatever, and stack them and say they deserve to get in over a two-loss Georgia team or a two-loss Alabama team
Well,
or
and
even Tennessee. I mean, that's a tough one. I know it's a one less loss, but man, there's no meat on that bone.
well, and and it's even going to get worse because we have that whole scenario in the SEC with you got a bunch of two loss teams that are have a good possibility of playing in the SEC championship.
Right.
And we talked about this a little bit last week. With why would you want to play in that game? Because you could very possibly get your third loss and be out of the top 12. But we don't know if the committee would do that or not. If they would penalize a team for playing in SEC championship, especially against a top three team. Let's just say it. Top 14. Let's just say it's Texas or
Yeah.
whoever it may be, and so that they got a hot mess going on there. And then, like you were saying, now we got a one-loss Indiana team that it would just make up a number that got beat by three touchdowns by Ohio State and was absolutely dominated. You got this one-loss team versus a three-loss Georgia or something. Who
Right.
played the toughest schedule in the country.
Ole Miss.
And
Yeah.
Ole Miss would be another one. So I mean, they've got with this whole system that they got. I'm sure they didn't count on it coming down to the way it's come down in a lot of these conferences. But I mean, the SEC is probably the biggest mess of them all because you have like five teams that are in the top 12 or whatever, and
Yeah.
and two of those teams are going to play in the SEC championship. So that's one of them's going to come away with a third loss, most likely. One of them's going to come away with it.
Yeah. The interesting thing for sure is of many interesting things is, the SEC is kind of cannibalizing to a certain degree but it's on the good side. Their top to middle or lower middle is super strong. They got some garbage at the end, like just about everybody else, but they have less garbage teams at the bottom. They're really strong at the top and in the middle, very strong,
Right.
more so than any other league, and it's not even close. I mean, I know Big Ten's considered the second best league, but they're four strong at the top, and then it's a major drop off compared to the SEC middle. There's no doubt about it. So you got these teams that are giving each other multiple losses, and what happens with the way the structure is, the four highest ranked conference champions, regardless of your record, get the bye. The next four teams go in order of who's left on the ranking. They don't pick and choose. They rank them starting after the first four go. Those teams get home games. So the way
Right.
that's fallen out is, Oregon, let's say, gets the bye for the Big Ten. Now you got Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State. However, what happens with Ohio State and Indiana tomorrow? Let's say it's a field goal game, so therefore IU doesn't drop very far. Who knows? And then those teams are going to get home games against what looks like SEC teams because they're all got two losses. Even though it's widely considered those teams are probably so. I think you have what could be possible is SEC Nation coming to the North, including Notre Dame, if they win out, which most people think they will, beating Army and then beating USC, and they'll get a home game. And so you got Alabama, Ole Miss, maybe even a Georgia, coming up to play, on a bunch of North teams. And I don't know if they'll be favored, but a lot of people think they could be favored in the eyeball test because
Right.
and if there's any snow in them games, I mean, we're talking about, the whiteout, Notre Dame, Columbus, crazy night games. I mean, that's going to be great TV. That's popcorn city, but who knows if it'll end up like that, but that's how it's set up now, but things will change for sure, but and then, let's say Colorado's hosting a game. If they end up being, one of the teams that's freezing cold in Colorado. So
Right.
interesting to think about, no doubt,
Yeah. Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but
It's going to be like we've been calling this for the last couple of weeks of all the the chaos that's coming with this
yeah,
for the committee with the way things have have the way things we've seen play out. So I mean it's still game. There's still some very important games to play that could clarify that picture much more. But I mean more than likely it is just going to be a big gemmed up mess. By when it's all said and done.
yeah, and it's 12 teams, and then it's huge conferences where the schedules was just so nuts. Who like Tennessee didn't or Texas didn't play as many teams as Georgia did of the good teams. Indiana hasn't played anybody until tomorrow, and that's the only team they're going to play that's good in the Big Ten. So it's like, how do you quantify who's good and who's not good when there's so much uncommonality? It's not like before with the East and West of all these where you played these teams and now it's like you got so many triangles. You beat them, but they beat us, and they beat them. It's going to be it's a mess. It's going to be really crazy, and there's no doubt, more so probably than all, there's going to be a lot of ticked off people. What is it? A week from Sunday, I guess it'll be, or 2 weeks from Sunday. Yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks from Sunday. Yeah, which will be the day after the championship. So interesting, but that's a few weeks away. We got games tomorrow to talk about. So there's a couple games. Obviously, we know about some of the games that are big. The biggest one being Ohio State and IU because of ranked on ranked top 5 matchup. But I want to start here with Ole Miss and Florida because Florida can wreck Ole Miss for good by winning this game. And Florida looks like they're playing the best football they have played all year in the last few weeks. Even with Langway, when he went out, if he hadn't stayed that game in Georgia, Georgia might have another loss. We
Right.
talked about that game. So, but Ole Miss is looking really good, and their defense is looking good, but they're going into the swamp. So, yeah, this is a game. If I was a betting guy, which I'm not, I don't think I'd even touch this game because I have no idea who's going to win this game. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, to me, it's who shows up for Ole Miss. We've seen them look absolutely awesome in the Georgian game. They were just so dominant. Not only was their offense going, that they have Jackson Dart, who's having an incredible season, but their defense was so impressive in that game. So I mean, if that Ole Miss team shows up and is prepared like they were against Georgia, they have a very good chance to go in there and win this game. But you're right. You have Florida, and I agree with you. I think they are playing their best football right now, and they're going to be at home. So yeah, this to me this is a toss up because you never know. Florida has the home field advantage. Ole Miss has been, I don't want to say hit and miss, but we've seen them look really good and we've seen them look
Yeah.
okay. So just who's gonna show up on this one would be. I'm like you could. I mean, right now I would flip a coin and make a pick on that one.
Excuse me. Yeah, I I think was it last week? Florida beat Tennessee at the Swamp. Was that last week? Right?
Uh,
Or was it Tennessee that they beat? Or I know they were
no,
chomping on somebody. Who did they beat last week? It was
no. Georgia beat Tennessee last week.
oh, that's okay. Then who did
But Florida
Flo-
beat who did they beat?
they were chomping somebody. I remember seeing it on the screen, man. They were slapping, doing
Yeah,
the chomp. Man, I have to look that up real quick. But yeah, you know, Ole Miss was when they played Georgia, they were at Ole Miss, right? So they had a home game. They
yes,
didn't go. They didn't go into Athens and win. And
no,
Tennessee went in and lost at Athens. So that was last week. So Ole Miss being on the road, I think, is another, not great thing for them, so to speak. But a couple weeks ago, I think we thought for sure they were going to not win, and they won. So of course it was Ole Miss or Georgia. They just,
they
you know,
won dominant. Won
yeah,
dominantly.
yeah. It was, I was thinking this is going to be the end. So just I kind of feel like I want to go with Ole Miss. I would for sure if they were at home, but being with Florida, like you said, I think it's a game I have no idea who's going to win for sure. But that's going to be a good game, and I think that's a 3:30 game. I'd have to look at that too because I know I know the Big 12. Both games that matter are all at the same time at 3:30. So speaking of the Big 12, BYU losing to Kansas makes this game really interesting because Arizona State can jump BYU by winning this game and be in line to get into the Big 12 championship game, which is crazy. But they'll tie them and have the tiebreaker against them. So, and then Colorado, of course, is playing Kansas at Arrowhead, which is right here. And, Kansas just beat BYU, and it's a home game for them, although it's at Arrowhead Stadium. And Colorado, I don't want to say Colorado's going to lose this game at all, but man, you never know. It's nobody's got a real home field advantage in this, so I think I would give the nod to Colorado on this one. They're playing
Yeah,
crazy
I mean,
football right now.
well, I mean, we all think we both picked against Colorado last week when they were playing Utah, and
Yeah.
and they just came in and took care of business against Utah. Ended up pretty much blowing them out there at the end. Um, so yeah, it's kind of, and I said that at the opening of the show. Got to start giving Colorado some credit because they've had a heck of a turnaround, and and they've done it with probably certainly, in my opinion, probably the best player in college football. And then then they have a real solid quarterback, and they've been able to protect a whole lot better. That was their biggest thing last year. They couldn't protect anybody. Teams were wheeling off 7, 8, 9 sacks a game against them. So
Oh yeah.
they've improved that. So just the fact that Colorado keeps proving. I would go with Colorado in this one.
Yeah, no doubt. We got somebody who chimed in. We want to give a shout out to. They got us an answer to something just as I was snagging it, and they are right. It's the Ashley Jeremiah Bradley. It was LSU that went down to Florida last week,
Uh huh.
and after the Northern Illinois loss, she's saying the toughest game Notre Dame had was Louisville, and so being independent, even if they went out, Notre Dame shouldn't get a home game. They should have to sit out this one. It's time for them to join a conference. That's definitely a contentious subject. We thank you, Ashley, for chiming in, and thank you for watching. We appreciate it, and it's good stuff because I actually heard a few weeks ago the way the whole setup is here. Notre Dame probably is less likely to join the conference because if they don't have to go to the extra conference championship game and go through a decent schedule with one loss, being Notre Dame and the cash, and if they look good, they're in, and they don't have to play as many games as everybody. So that's a good point, and I feel like there's conferences are trying to squeeze them to get in, but it seems like it's just backfiring because they have a
Well,
huge contract with NBC, and they don't need to join a conference, and I don't think they even need to less now that there's 12 instead of 4.
yeah, I mean, they had the terrible loss, but I mean, they certainly have rebounded from that. But I mean, I agree they do need to be in a conference. But we just got done talking about conference championships and how that can hurt a team in the conference championship. I still think the big picture is to get in the playoffs.
Right.
Conference championships are fine, and they always meant I think probably in the past they probably meant a whole lot more than what they mean right now because of the new format that they have. Um, but yeah, I mean, I thought for a while that Notre Dame should get in a conference, but you know, big money there. And they keep getting in.
Right.
These things. So they kind of get the eye test thing going on, even though they have the bad loss. They certainly have look pretty good of late.
Yeah, I know she mentions Louisville being their the toughest game. I know as far as a great win for them was definitely A&M to start the season, and then they backed it up with a horrible loss with
Right.
NIU. So but from an optic standpoint, A&M was a good win, and they're high up in the SEC. Beating Louisville was nice. If they beat Army, it's going to be a good win, only because Army is ranked, although that'll probably bounce them out. But it's one of those things. I mean, I think Notre Dame is playing their best football the last few weeks for sure. Ever since it seemed like NIU, they've been playing a lot better. But it has the quality, and that's going to be another team they're going to look at. One loss, Notre Dame, no conference champion. How do they stack up against two lost SEC teams? And that's a tough one. I can't really sit there and say Notre Dame is better than a Georgia or even Alabama or Tennessee. There's so many teams. I mean, Oregon's the number one team in the nation. It's unanimous, but are they really the best team that you think they can beat anybody? And I don't know.
Well,
I mean, there's too many really good teams. I don't know if anybody is locked to beat anybody.
no, there's the thing, and you got to remember the Ohio State Oregon game was at Oregon, an
Yep.
absolute crazy place to play, insane atmosphere. Being like a whiteout at Penn State or an LSU game. Out there at Oregon. So I
Yep.
mean, and everybody automatically, if you look at all the brackets that they have drawn up and everything, they have Ohio State at 5. So it's almost like they're automatically assuming that in the Big Ten championship game is going to be Oregon and Ohio State, and Oregon's going to win that game.
Right.
The only thing with that, as close as that game was, and Oregon being at home, now all of a sudden it's going to be in Indianapolis. So that's where the Big
Yeah.
Ten
Yeah. That's where it is.
championship. Now it's going to be in Indianapolis. Now Oregon's going to have to come across the country to get there. So I mean that game's going to could possibly take on a whole new look.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree. Both teams are a little different than they were, 11 weeks ago in week 2 or week 3, whatever it was. So if they make it, I mean, Ohio State's going to get past Indiana tomorrow, which I know you're very bullish on Indiana not having a chance. So,
Well, I just I look at Indiana, and I mean I'm happy for Indiana. I
yeah,
really
yeah,
they've had a great season, but I look at their strength of schedule. You look at their roster. I mean, Ohio State probably is arguably one of the strongest rosters in college football right now. And all these 4 and 5 star guys. Versus Indiana, and I know they have a couple, but we're basically looking at 4 or 5 star guys against 2 and 3 star guys. So I mean that's why I favor big time for Ohio State. Plus Ohio State's at home. Um, Indiana's their toughest game so far was Michigan. Michigan's had issues offensively and quarterback play and all that kind of thing. I mean they are pretty good defensively, and that ended up being like a 5 point game.
yeah,
I mean, it was like a 2 point game, almost right there to the end.
yep,
So
yeah. It was close.
yeah,
Michigan held with them in the end. They can't make a comeback. So yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I just think Ohio State's going to be too much for Indiana. I mean, I'd love to see a great game. Come down to the final end, and Indiana really be as good as what some of the polls have them listed as. But I can't see it. I think Ohio State's going to win this game fairly easily. 2 scores, more than 2 scores. Um,
Yeah.
so
Being a Buckeye fan, it's hard for me, but I do hope you're right, and I see your logic, and I agree with the logic. But the unknown is this is not your dad's IU team, so who knows? But players are players, matchups are matchups, and I never make excuses. Ohio State did lose their center a couple of days ago. He tore
I
his
saw that.
Achilles, a guy from
Saw that.
Alabama. So that's not necessarily an excuse. That just means, hey, next man up, and they got to jungle things around, and they have 3 days to do it. Again, that's not an excuse at all. It's just something they got to do, and every team deals with injuries, so it's not like anybody's going through unscathed. So hopefully they can that can not do anything detrimental to them game plan wise, because obviously they may change game plan a little bit, which everybody does. If you got a running team, you game planned against a team that's got a good, I mean, that's how you work it out, is how things are going and what you got to do at halftime and all that stuff. So good game tomorrow for sure between them two, and hopefully the Buckeyes come on top. And if they don't, two-loss team, both games will be the top 5 teams. It'll be interesting if they still get in.
Oh,
Well,
they'll
that's
still,
one thing
yeah, they'll
I
still,
think they should. That's one thing I wanted to mention was the Mord Manual on Tuesday night after the rankings. They were asked him, how's the committee going to look to teams that go to the championship games and lose, where other teams aren't even playing in the championship, so they didn't have to have that other loss. And he said they definitely, you know, reward teams for getting to the championship games, which makes me think what I've kind of thought all along is the conference 4 winners get in and the runners up are going to get in. It's not like years before where you got the East and West, and the West blows and the East is great, so you got some 6 loss
yeah,
team making it in
you
there.
know,
They're
you
all
know,
good.
right. But we've seen in years past that the loser of that conference game, be out of the playoffs. Of course, they only had 4 teams then, so I mean, it was a lot tougher. But we've also
Right.
seen teams, drop pretty far from that conference saying it. And I was, I listened to him, and his answer, it wasn't real definitive of hey, this
It
is
was
what we're
vague.
looking at. It was kind of like, oh, we're going to look at the whole body of work,
Right.
the whole thing
Right.
like this. So I mean, it didn't really say, hey, we're not going to penalize them, and also didn't say we were going to reward them because they did play
Right.
in a conference championship. So I mean, he kind of skirted around the whole thing to me. He said what he needed to say uh, to make it sound good, but it still doesn't clarify whatsoever of how things are going to work.
Yeah, you look at like the Boise State in the Mountain West, you almost figure, if they make it to the championship game and lose, they're not getting in. They already got one loss, which is to Oregon in overtime. Yeah, but it's a what's considered a league that's not tough, and we've seen what happens in years past. One year Cincinnati was fantastic. They got to the Final Four and they just got destroyed, steamrolled, by I think it was Georgia. I'm not sure, but well, Ashley's chimed in again a little bit here. We always want to give people the
This is
airtime. We're
this is
happy
actually
they.
this is actually Jeremiah. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay, so it's two different. Oh, gotcha. So Oregon is tough with a 1.1 for OSU. Absolutely, buddy. They have pretty much dominated everyone they have played. For the most part, they have. I mean, I'm not going to count something against them at Camp Randall because that's a tough place to go in and play at night. And it's a
Yes,
tough environment, and college football is college football. So, but when they go to Wisconsin, squeak out a 3-point win, definitely beatable. Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't be more correct. I don't know who's not beatable except for when you look at certain teams, you say if they bring the game they had, like if Georgia plays away against Texas, they look unbeatable. If Ole Miss plays away against Georgia, they look unbeatable. If Alabama plays away against what's it, South Carolina, they boat raced. Was
no,
that who it was?
LSU,
LSU.
LSU.
This looks unbeatable. So it's like there are teams that have looked unbeatable at times, and other ones, where they haven't looked unbeatable. Is this all depends on who's gonna show up and how they're gonna play, and it really comes down to great coaching. And that's where guys like Kirby Smart you're talking about, who makes great halftime adjustments, and others, get in the game. You see how it goes. Nick Saban was always great at that, not afraid to pull a quarterback to put somebody else in to get a win, So it's a lot of really good football coming. It's going to be really exciting. There's no doubt. So a lot of riverboat gamblers, Dan Lanning's a riverboat gambler type guy. He's kind of crazy, you never know what he's going to do, and he's that, at the diabolical, they say, with that whole pushing the guy out there, getting the 12 man on the field rule, which was genius in some men's mind stuff. So crazy
Well,
stuff, crazy stuff.
yeah, and like you said, some teams have looked absolutely
There you go,
really.
giving you props.
His wife does much football. It is Jeremiah. So yeah, that you know the most impressive thing about those teams are the teams that went into Georgia going into Texas, Alabama going into LSU at night.
Yeah.
Those were really impressive games. But kind of like Jeremiah said, beatable. Oregon's beatable, and I agree with you. I think I don't see anybody that's not beatable. I don't see somebody that's that is so strong that that they're not beatable in space. On a given Saturday. I mentioned last week. You look at teams that really wouldn't want to play right now. And I mentioned South Carolina last week. I wouldn't want to play. I wouldn't want to play. Put South Carolina. I wouldn't have them on my schedule coming up. Because man, that could cost you a lot.
Yeah.
So scheduling and strength of schedule and how things play out. But yeah, absolutely. The way things have. That's why you have a 3 or 4 2-loss teams in the SEC, which it really is a really strong conference.
Oh yeah.
It's not just the top 2 or 3 anymore. We're about 4 or 5 deep now, changing things there. So and then with Michigan being down in the Big Ten, right now, even though Indiana's up there, Penn State's always up there. I'm still not a believer in Penn State. They every year they're up in the top.
Yep.
5, 6, 7. We'll see how that plays out. But to me, it's Oregon and Ohio State. Last year it was Michigan and Ohio State. For many years it was Michigan and Ohio State. With the section of a team having a really good season like Indiana's having this year,
right?
And performing really well. But across the board, and talent and everything else, you look at it. The SEC absolutely up for grabs. The Big Ten, I think, is Oregon and Ohio State. And you look at some of the other conferences. I'm not a big believer in Miami. They got a great quarterback, but how that's all going to play out and how those top 4 spots are going to be, because you're looking at possibly Miami and Boise State could possibly be 2 of those top 4 spots.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's Clemson is right there in the ACC, 2 games left, and neither one of them are ACC games. They're playing Citadel, and then they finish with South Carolina. So they're 2 up on Miami. If Miami's got 2 games left, if they lose one of them, they're going to be jumped by Clemson to get into the game, because one of their losses was to Georgia. So it's very crazy how things are going to play out. I don't think Miami's going to lose, but you never know. Your buddy John Austin, he wants to know, can Ohio State lose against Michigan and still get in the playoffs? And I think if they beat Indiana, then I think yes. I think they can, because they'll play for the Big Ten championship. If they beat Indiana, they'll have 1 loss. Indiana will have a loss, and if they lose the next week, it doesn't matter if Indiana or Penn State win, because they beat both them. So their tiebreakers are all go Ohio State's way, and there's nobody else left to catch them, so they can still get in. Question is, can they lose to Michigan and lose to Oregon and get in? That'd be 4 losses.
Well,
3 losses. I don't know about that.
One, it's going to come down to Ohio State and Oregon. Ohio State is not going to lose to Indiana. Can Ohio? Let's answer the question. Let's break it down here. Can Ohio State lose against Michigan? Absolutely not. Not even a chance. Michigan struggling and all that stuff, and it's great that we've had this rivalry the last 3 years. Whatever, it came back. Before that, it was dominant by Ohio State for 10 years or whatever, and until Michigan gets things turned around a little bit right now. It's Ohio State. So, can Ohio State lose to Michigan? No, absolutely not.
Well, here's another question, or another layer of that. If Ohio State beats Indiana and loses to Michigan, do they have to win the national championship to save Ryan Day's job from losing to Michigan when they're horrible?
Oh, if he loses to Michigan this year, and we can't say, I say it can't happen, and I don't believe that it will. But let's just say some crazy things happen, and a herd of elephants crossed your front yard at a certain time, and all that kind of thing. There's no way Ryan Day is going to keep his job if he does lose to Michigan.
I
Yeah,
mean, but if he wins a national championship, it's. I mean, I'm old. I'm 55. My thing is beat Michigan, and I don't care about anything else. Everything else take care of itself. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and then just go on. Where other people are like, I'll take a chip over a Michigan win and stuff like that. Jeremiah is chiming in. He says it all depends on what they do against Indiana tomorrow and how Penn State finishes the season. They certainly can't lose to Indiana and lose to Michigan. There's no doubt.
I
I
mean,
think
yeah,
they'll be, if they're in at all, they're way, way in the back of the CFP. And because basically they hadn't, only team they beat would be Penn State. They would have lost to Oregon by one. They would have lost to Indiana by whatever. And then they lose to Michigan, which is a 4-loss team at this time. Who knows what's going to happen this week? So,
yeah. I mean,
but I'm with you. It's not going to happen.
yeah, I mean, if that was if that was to happen, everybody in the country has been wrong about Ohio State. I just
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't I don't see it happening.
And
We already talked about the Indiana thing. Uh,
Jeremiah also says 4 years in a row losing to the team up north.
they need to
Dave
update
needs
his
to update
resume.
his resume. Yeah, it's
3 years in a row, isn't it?
well, he's saying if it is 4 years in a row.
Oh, if they
you lose.
lost, he's saying
Yeah, if they lost.
they lost. So let's just go back to John's question and say they lost to Michigan. Let's say they beat Indiana and they lose to Michigan. That gives them 2 losses, but they would still play in the Big Ten championship against
Yep.
Oregon. So then, if they beat Oregon, certainly they're in the playoffs.
Yeah. And if they don't get bounced in the playoffs, I don't think they have to win the national championship. He'll be in the doghouse no matter what, but they can. But they get. I mean, there's a good contingent that think they have to win it all if they don't beat Michigan. This year, just period, it's a chip or bust, and I don't like saying that because man, only one team can win the championship, and it's a crazy tough college football. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to win every game. So you never know how it's going to go. But I you got to beat Michigan because it's the rivalry, man. And 3 years in a row, and then the whole cheating scandal is going to come out next month and all that. Everybody's going to be surprised at what they're going to hear about that. But all that aside, they got to beat that team up north, and I think they will. They got
Well,
Indiana before
they
that.
have to they have to beat Indiana. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Right. They got to
But
beat Indiana before they can even
because
think about
if
thinking
you
about
want,
Michigan.
if there's one game you have to lose out of those two, honestly, it would be Michigan. You can't lose to Indiana, beat Michigan, and you won't be playing for the Big Ten championship at all. And then you just beat Michigan. Who cares? You're going to be a really bad team, probably playing on the road if you get it at all. You beat
Well,
Indiana and lose to Michigan, doesn't matter. You can still go to the Big Ten championship game, win it, and you got to bye. So you control your own destiny. So you got to beat Indiana over Michigan. There's no doubt.
well, yeah, I mean that's like saying Alabama lose to Oklahoma and then beat Auburn.
Right.
Your biggest rivalry. Oh, okay, well, big deal. You're sitting at home watching the playoffs, so
Right.
all that coming into to play here. But I just don't. I just can't see. Uh, Certainly, Indiana's a better team than Michigan. They proved that last week.
Yep. Yep.
So, and that was
And-
at Michigan.
Yep. It was a road game.
Yeah, I mean, that was a road game for them at Michigan. So they're
Was it
certainly
at
a better
Michigan?
team
Yeah,
than
it was, it
Michigan
was.
is. So, we'll kind of see. We'll kind of see how it goes. I'll really be surprised if it's a really close game. I could see possibly a close game in the first half, maybe even going into the third quarter. But coming into that fourth quarter and stuff, I think Ohio State's going to take over.
Yeah, I completely agree. Give me the wrong week here. Was that? That was a couple weeks ago actually, because they had a bye last week when that was at Indiana. That was a home game, 20-15.
Oh,
Michigan.
and I thought that game
Yeah.
was at Michigan, I
Yeah,
I watched it too. So you would think I would have known where it was played at. Yeah, it's that old age.
Yeah.
Thing. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So.
No doubt. Donuts. I just keep it easy. Eat the same thing. Let's see here. We've talked a little bit about UK and Texas. Texas got to win. If they lose this game, it's not good for them, especially with they don't have a strong resume getting killed by Georgia, and they basically beat Vanderbilt in Michigan. So they got to win that game for sure.
Yeah.
And what do we got over here? We're talking Ohio State and IU for sure. That's the games at noon, so that'll be all over with, and so many other games to follow after that. Big game. Hopefully, a big win for the Buckeyes. SMU, Virginia. SMU can't afford another loss. I don't think they're going to lose this game at all, but Virginia is kind of sneaky. But SMU just needs to roll in to get to the ACC championship game, probably against Miami, and that's interesting because I think SMU is not as highly ranked as Miami, and SMU's only loss is to BYU, which is just now a one-loss team, where Miami just got beat by Georgia Tech, but somehow they're ranked higher. And I honestly think that all goes back to what the AP was in the beginning of the year. If you're way down in the beginning of the year, the AP, it takes you forever to get up, especially if you're not, in a bigger conference, like Indiana's moved up, and I think it's because they're in the Big Ten, because they weren't ranked at all in the preseason. So SMU is a really good team, and I really think they can and might just win the ACC, especially if they play. I don't think it matters if they play, but Clemson might be a better team all the way around than Miami. Not a great team, but a better team all the way around, because Miami's really up and down. It's all Cam Ward. They're playing from behind all the time. They got a lot of ugly football, but they're pulling games out, and then it caught up with them a couple weeks ago. So
a lot of those teams are, you just described three or four of those teams. I mean, SMU, BYU. I mean, they've all had those games where, looked like they were going to lose whatever, and they end up pulling it out. Of course, Miami probably more so than the others.
Yeah.
Clemson, just the insistent, they're not consistent at all. I thought Pittsburgh had them last week, and they ended up pulling that one out.
Yeah.
So that
40-yard run to win the game for the quarterback.
Yeah. So that whole conference is kind of jammed up with teams that keep pulling out wins, and nothing real dominant that I see.
Yeah.
So that's what it's going to come down to. Two of those teams are going to match up, and it'll probably be a heck of a game, but I can't see any of those teams going much farther than their conference.
So here we still got our chatters in, which I'm very happy about, man. I'm glad you guys are chatting in with us, because we love that. We're looking forward to people joining in and conversations. So I got a chat here I'm going to pull up. Before I do, I'll throw some out there that you can talk about. Maybe they'll chime in. Do you think that the ACC and the Big 12, how much chance do they have to get more than one team in?
How big a chance do they have to get more than one team in?
Yeah. The ACC or the Big 12?
I don't think that they do. We could look at records, and if you look at the win-loss thing, but then you still got to look at the strength of schedule thing, and how they've won games, and kind of like what the guy said on the committee thing, looking at the whole body of work of these teams. I would be surprised if they got more than one team in.
Yeah, I a couple weeks ago we were talking about, here we got Jeremiah. Kentucky's got nothing to lose, and they gave Georgia fits. They certainly did, to the point Georgia didn't score a tee to the fourth quarter. Yeah, there's no doubt. Texas is going to have a game on their hand. I mean, I know it's at Texas. That's good for them, but if they play like they did against Georgia, or better more, if Kentucky plays like Georgia did against Texas, it's going to be a world of hurt, down there in Austin. There's no doubt. But getting back to the, Pitt, 3 or 4 weeks ago was an undefeated team. Now they got 3 losses. It kind of pulls down the ACC a little bit. Miami having all those struggles and then losing. I think if it was an undefeated Pitt and a one-loss SMU to BYU, now you're talking 2 kind of strong teams in a decent league, but that's really hurt them. So I really think, it's one and done, for the ACC. And I think that ship is completely sailed on the Big 12. Whoever wins it gets in, and the other one just isn't going to have a chance. Because it's the resume more than anything of what's gone on there. And Kansas was supposed to be the team coming into that league, and they've been nowhere to be found. And other ones have stepped up. But Colorado, great season, destroyed by Nebraska. But other than that, it's been a really good season for them. And just 2 years ago, they're a 1-win team. Now they're, looking like they're going to be a 10-win team potentially if they're not already. I can't remember what the record is, but they're looking good. They're playing Kansas at Arrowhead Stadium tomorrow, and they locked down USC. Guy flipped away from USC to Colorado for I think the 2026 class, or 2025 class. So, and they got a great quarterback coming in where it's Dion said he's not leaving, even though his son's going to be going to the pros. So, but I do think it's a one and done for them. And probably the bigger question is who's going to get that fourth spot? Is it going to be Boise State or the winner of the Big 12? Because they're real close right there. And if it's an upset like an SMU beating Miami in the ACC, that brings that into play for them too. Because Miami's sitting nice up there with SMU is way out. But if they beat them, I don't know if that springboards them up. Whatever, it'll be interesting to see how that all lays out.
Yeah, I mean the eye test for especially the ACC is just not there in my opinion. And then going back to what Jeremiah said about Kentucky playing Georgia within a point, South Carolina playing Alabama within 2 points. I mean you're going to have that. It's all about matchups. We've talked about that several times. One team's not going to match up the same as how another team does. Kentucky. They knew a lot about Georgia. They got two or three coaches that came from Georgia. They were setting on that. They were setting on Georgia, much like Ole Miss was. You heard Lane Kiffin say, "Hey, this game started for us last year when they beat us 59,
right,
-4, or whatever it is." And we started right then recruiting and doing stuff. So basically, so we can beat Georgia. So the match ups here is really what it's all about. And every team, every team. We've seen the close game with Oregon. Ohio State's had some close games. That we're just going to have that, and it certainly makes things exciting. But the bottom line is that they win those games, and
right.
As long as they win those games, when it's all said and done, whether it's by 10 or 1 or 2 or 3, I still say it's all about matchups, and basically it's on the line of scrimmage. That offensive line versus that defensive line. And of course we've seen the big play thing come into effect that happened in the Alabama Georgia game.
Yep.
So it's all about those matchups, and none of them are going to be the same. Because Georgia dominated Texas doesn't mean that the way they match up doesn't mean that Kentucky is even going to be able to match up with. I mean, maybe they will. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm just saying past scores and close games like that don't really mean anything.
Yeah. It's and then there's weather. There's always variables depending on where you're playing in the country. Weather is a kind of good equalizer with certain teams. If if you can't throw the ball, then all of a sudden you got running game, and all of a sudden maybe the Kentucky's a better ground game than Texas or something. Who knows? I mean, but they're down there in Austin, so unless it's raining down there, it shouldn't be that all that bad this time of year. But yeah, I really do. I think one of the big questions is. If Notre Dame, let's say Army beats Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's out. I really do.
Oh, they are out.
Yeah, and that makes a nice area for a fifth SEC team to get in. If you got 8, 4 SEC, 4 Big Ten, that's 8. You only got 4 left. One of them's Boise State, so you got 3. And then of those 3. Would be Notre Dame, but not. So it was that. We're doing the math right. 4-4. Yeah. So the 3 left is going to be the at-large teams, and that's where you're picking. The who's left in the, the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and that's going to be interesting. I think there's only really 4 teams worthy in the Big Ten of even getting in. I'm not saying they're all going to get in, but obviously it's. At this point, obviously Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State, and will any of those teams play their way out or not? Because Penn State is sitting in a good spot, I think. don't lose any more of your games. They always have tough time going to Minnesota, and that's where they go this year. I think it's either this week or the last week. They play Minnesota in Minnesota. If they don't lose any games, they won't play for the Big Ten championship. So they'll have a week off, and then they'll host a game probably with one loss to being to number whatever team in the nation in Ohio State.
Right.
So that I think that'll look good enough for them to get in. And what a crazy scene that'll be in Beaver Stadium, as we know. It'll be a whiteout, I'm sure.
I mean, they'll most likely get in, and and maybe they get a whiteout, and in a huge advantage that side of it. But after that, they're going to have to go on the road and or a neutral site or something, and that's going to make all the difference in the world for a team like that. But I mean, Penn State they're always up there. They get all the hype in the world, but they can't get over the hump. At least they haven't yet. I'm not saying that they won't, but
they haven't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, but I mean, certainly in college football, the SEC and the Big Ten are certainly running things, as far as the top.
And the interesting thing is, both leagues have really good at the top, and then SEC has much better in the middle. So, but what's going to get into the 12 is mostly the top teams. So you look at the SEC now. If it rolls on to A&M and Texas, and I think that into the championship game for the SEC. Is it fair to say whoever wins that game, the other one's going to get in because they made it to the extra game? It shouldn't count against them getting to the championship game. It's tough to get to that game in the SEC because everybody's beating the snot out of each other. So the two teams that get into the championship game, I think they're both going to be in unless something weird happens between now and then, which I don't think it's going to, because this is a week where the SEC has a lot of games that don't matter. Next week's a rivalry.
Right now it looks like Alabama, Texas. I mean, we don't know that's going to be the final thing because obviously they both got to win their games. But you look at percentages and who's supposed to win and all that kind of stuff. It looks like Alabama, Texas.
So if those two get in, whoever wins and losses, they'll get in. So then let's say you get three more teams in. Well, who are those teams? If you got Alabama, Texas in, then you got to pick between Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and I guess A&M. Unless I'm forgetting somebody else that's toward the top up there. And A&M, it'll be interesting. They may all get in. Who knows? I mean, a lot of it depends on Notre Dame.
Georgia wins out. Georgia wins out. They're getting in.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even if they don't need to make the championship game, then they're going to get. They just win out.
That's and that's what we've been talking about. Actually making that championship game could actually hurt you, and hey, we made it to the SEC championship. We turned our season around. We recovered from the loss from Tennessee and Vanderbilt, but we're sitting at home watching the playoffs.
Well, let's say Georgia got two losses. They make it to the SEC championship game because somebody loses, whatever. And now, kind of like Ohio State when they played Wisconsin 10 years ago, 59-0. I mean, that was just embarrassing. And that's what vaulted them with a third-string quarterback into that fourth spot ahead of TCU. If that was a field goal game, 23-20, they probably would have never got in. So if Georgia goes to the SEC championship game against whomever, as long as they don't get destroyed a la an Ole Miss game, I think they'll get in, even if they lose they have three losses, because they made it to that game. I think they should get in because they've played the toughest schedule in the whole league, and they made it to their conference championship game, which is hard to do. And they didn't get killed. It was a tough game. No big deal. But that doesn't mean they're going to do it that way.
I don't see a 3-loss team getting in. I may be surprised, and one of them get in, and they would certainly have an argument and probably even have the resume to get in that 11th or 12th spot. But man, it's going to be tough with the way things are right now, and of course they can change this very weekend. With the way things are right now, I just don't see a 3-loss team getting in that 12-team playoff.
I feel like I want to say the same, but it's what is the committee going to do? Because when they start, and I've seen them do this on the Tuesday night show, when they start arguing about this, they'll say, "Okay, who do you think's better, Georgia or BYU?" Well, I think Georgia's better. So would you put a 3-loss team, Georgia in over a 1-loss BYU or 2-loss BYU that didn't win their conference championships game? It's like But at the same time, I think it's what happened on the field should matter. You can't be great. That doesn't mean because in college basketball, the best team doesn't win every year. It's the team that wins the tournament. It's not the best team during this regular season. And I don't know if I want college football to be that way. I don't want
Well,
the college tournament for basketball becoming into the football tournament. I want it to be the best teams, but that's where it's subjective.
well, Division two and Division three in football, they all get in. I mean, it's kind of like the basketball thing. I mean, they all get in.
Right.
They get that playoff in. And they have a national champion. And why couldn't the Division one do that? I mean, they actually, they could.
They would just have to get Division One down because I think it's 133 schools now in Division One football. They got to cut that way down if they're going to get everybody in.
Well, I mean, they take the whatever. Take the top 64. I mean, whatever.
John Austin, 3 losses in, you're out. A committee will lose credibility if they allow that. I don't disagree. I don't disagree, man. I really don't. As good as Georgia's played, man, you just can't overlook losses. And I don't care who you are. Georgia doesn't matter. You can't overlook losses, even if they're great teams. You can't be rewarded for losing to great teams too often. One is okay, but yeah, so it does matter and it should matter, and I hope it always does. Because right now, if it matters, that makes the regular season awesome. Which what we're seeing right now, the regular season is great because it's kind of hard to get in. But if they start just rewarding losses, then you're telling the ACC and the Big 12 you got no shot, no matter what you do.
Well, okay. Like you said, I mean, let's look at it. Is a BYU as good as Georgia? Are they as good as Ole Miss? Are they as good as Alabama? Are they as good as Ohio State? Are they as good as Oregon? And I mean, that goes on and on. But I mean, John's absolutely right. I mean, I think with the way they set things up, the committee is absolutely going to lose credibility the way things in because they can only put 12 in.
Right.
We thought it was bad whenever they only had to put 4 in, and then there was, certainly a big controversy over that 5th and 16.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have 12, and we're going to have this big old hot mess of 2 lost teams that played in conference championships, and it could happen in the Big Ten possibly. So they're going to lose credibility whatever they do. They either got to put those teams in, or they got to look at the strength of schedule, the body of work, all that stuff, and figure out that this team is one of the top 12 teams in the country.
Yeah, we got Jeremiah says he doesn't see 2 teams from the ACC or the Big 12 getting the playoff. BYU, Arizona State, Colorado. It's a battle for conference championship game with a nod to Arizona State over Colorado for beating Kansas State. And yeah, absolutely. That was the Arizona State. They're that game's gonna be tomorrow, same time as BYU and Kansas. And I'm interested in that game. I hate to say I'm pulling for Arizona State, because they're playing BYU. I like BYU, but I love an underdog. So. But it's going to be hard to see. It's just funny. What do you tell Georgia? I mean, first of all, like we always say, they're playing the schedule they were given. Well, it was the toughest schedule in football, and that's not their fault. So now it's like we're being penalized by losing to great teams where these people didn't even have to play the great teams. And I get that too, but I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you can't just put who you think is the best team, regardless of who they've lost to, in because – it's like I said, it's going to be a bad precedent for sure.
Well, none of us see 2 teams getting in from the ACC or Big 12, and we all agree on that. I can't see it happening. But like I said, the committee, we've been shocked by what they've done before. So, we don't know until it all goes down.
Do you think the automatic qualifiers are hurting the 12-team process? The conference championships automatically get in. Do you think that's hurting anything? Or because if they didn't have it, would anybody get in for the Big 12 or the ACC?
Well, I mean, I understand. They're trying to leave importance to that conference championship,
right?
But then it's a 2-sided coin, and we've been talking about it the whole show. that the loser of that conference game is possibly out of the mix. So the whole conference thing. So I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of muddied the water that all of a sudden, okay, now the top four teams is going to be let's just say it's a Boise State and Miami, or
Right.
they're taking two of those spots, and of course, I mean, they're going to get a bye. I mean, that's another big plus for them. But they're going to take one of those spots. Now, are those teams as good as the other 10,
Right.
8, 9? I mean, that is a big that is a big question. The fact that you even have to say that number 3 and number 4, let's just say that's what they are. Number
Yeah.
3 and number 4. Almost everybody in the country questions if they could even beat the next 8.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
The fact that the 4 of the top 5 conference championships get the 4 top spots. That when like you said, Arizona, let's say Arizona State makes it and wins the Big 12, they're way down in the rankings, yet they're in the top 4 spots, or 5th spot. I mean, so it would just be, they get a home game. So, but if you don't have them getting those spots, then 1 through 4 would, if you go by the rankings, it'd be the Big 10. Getting 3 of the 4 top 4 spots. It's like it's such a it's such a weird dynamic. I personally think I would like to see, if they got to add a couple more teams, no buys, and the first couple rounds be home games, and keep it on campus, keep it exciting, and no auto, you want automatics, that's fine, and maybe have conferences against conferences to start things, it's something, I don't know, it just seems like it's weird right now, and as interesting as it's going to be. There's a lot of teams that are going to be sitting there going, you know what, we would have benefited by not playing the tough teams we played,
Well,
and it's going
in,
to
in
hurt
the
SEC teams, I think, because they're the ones that are playing the tougher schedules.
Well, in the committee and the commissioner talking, to me, talking in circles of how this is done. This is the first year of it, so I mean, to me, they need to sit down and say, okay, look, this is what we're looking for. This is what we look for. It's strength of schedule. It's the eye test. It's the common opponent thing. It's whatever they list that those things are. I mean, and then people, well, now we got kind of something to go by. As it is right now, um, I could throw just a bunch of paper up in the air, and however it comes down, that's the way it's going to be, and so nobody knows what it is. So
Right.
I mean, this being the first year of it, I'm hopefully, because I'm sure they did not anticipate having this big mess that they're going to have.
Yeah.
Um, hopefully they can lay out, hey, this, the committee is looking for these things. These are the things that come into play to make a difference of who gets in and who gets out. And and then it's not so much of of how many losses you have, or conference championship and all that kind of thing, because I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, they really muddied the water with that whole thing. But and then the fact that we don't know. What are you looking for? Your 3-loss team, you're out. Well, maybe we don't know.
Right.
What are you looking for? And like I said, you listened to him talk the other day, and he didn't really answer any questions. I didn't think. Well,
Yeah.
we appreciate that they make that game, and we look at that. Okay, but I mean, does it matter or does it not?
Right.
So they really need to clarify um, what they're looking at to get to make this 12-team playoff.
Yeah. And it seems like sometimes they always come back to, well, it's the eye test. And that is so subjective, because whose eyes are looking at it for the eye test. Because they were saying at one point, they're saying, well, that's a good loss, and then for another team, it's a bad win. But I'm like, oh,
Good loss. What is a good loss? I mean, is that even something that's even possible?
right. I mean,
Well, that was a good loss.
right.
What?
You should never celebrate a loss. So, well, we went and played that tough team. Well, that's fine, but you didn't win. And I know Liberty, doesn't play anybody tough, and they're undefeated almost every year. but they're not getting in. It's because they just don't play in a great conference. It's kind of like somebody said something the other day at my work about the European Soccer League has when you play good enough, they move you up into a different league for you to be able to play with the big boys. And if you don't play good enough, they move you back down. So maybe there should be so many teams in the FBS that are good, and if you are not holding your own, they slide you back down to a lower league, and then bring up somebody that's playing good, and that's how they keep everything top notch. And I don't know if that'll ever happen, but that's just what they do in soccer over in Europe, But
No, I hate soccer. But the you look at last week. Okay, Mercer was 9-1, so they get absolutely trashed by Alabama. No surprise to anyone. And they take their $5 million and they head back home. And, I mean, is that something that you look at and go, that was a good loss?
Yeah, right.
The only reason it'd be a good loss is because of the money that you got.
Yeah, good losses are. It's not even a good loss. For in the beginning of the season, when directional the school from nowhere goes and plays Ohio State, and Ohio State pays them $4 million to come and get their complete butt stomped out of them because it's like a preseason game. That's a good loss because A, you get to play in the shoe, and B, you get a whole bunch of money for your athletic department.
Well, money.
But that doesn't mean the players feel any better about it, other than they get to play on the shoe or whatever. I think we missed this one here. Jeremiah was saying, so look at Georgia look at who Georgia has lost to. Then they should look at who Notre Dame has beaten, because Texas A&M and Louisville were the greatest wins. Yep, and they get to slide in because they're independent, not beating Notre Dame. It's just my opinion. Hey, dude, I think it's a good argument. If somehow Georgia don't get in, the only way I think they don't get in is they have the third loss. But I still think they're a better team than Notre Dame. That didn't mean they are a better team than Notre Dame was. So it's interesting stuff. I got a small feeling Jeremiah is not a big Notre Dame fan, but that's okay.
It kind of looks that way, doesn't it? Here's the thing about that though. Now, if Texas A&M runs a table and beats Texas, how does that change things for Notre Dame? All of a sudden, they have one of the biggest wins in the country.
Yeah.
So things can absolutely change in the next couple of weeks. We don't know that, but I pretty much agree with what Jeremiah is saying about that. But like I said, as things play out, we'll just see. We'll see how that happens. I don't. I can sit here and say I don't think that's going to happen. That ain't going to happen. But
right.
One thing, even though I'm usually right almost all the time.
Right.
There has been that one time, I can't remember what year it was, but 73, 74. Anyways, there was that one time that I did miss something. So
I think your wife knows when you were wrong, if I'm not mistaken. I think she could tell you when you're wrong.
You think? She got a whole friggin' book.
Yeah, I thought I heard the other day that Oregon has the #1 strength of record. I'm thinking, how is that possible? I like Oregon, but with the teams they play, I know I would, as an Ohio State fan, would never say Ohio State's got the best strength of record, So for Oregon to have that, and how is that not? The hardest schedule is definitely Georgia. How is that not the hardest strength of record? I don't understand that metric. I tried to look it up the other day, and it was like trying to memorize pi. It was so ridiculous. Got another Jeremiah, OSU, but a college football fan across the board. Brian Kelly ruined Notre Dame for me. Is he saying he likes OSU or he hates OSU?
No, not only did he run Notre Dame, then he went to LSU, and he's going to run LSU, which they were already ruined in my book, as far as that go. But I understand what he's saying. My son and Jeremiah, they know each other really well. My son's he's a big Notre Dame fan.
Your son is?
Yeah, he's big Notre Dame fan. So Jeremiah, my son, and a group of guys grew up playing baseball together and all of that, that kind of thing. So at one time they were really tight knit group. Unfortunately, they don't stay young anymore. They all grow up and start having their own opinions about Notre Dame and that kind of thing. But then it's great to hear from Jeremiah. It's great to hear from John also.
Oh yeah,
love that. Get in there and see some other opinions.
Think of the 9 o'clock time slots, bringing in a little more listeners on Friday, so we might have to lock this down maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll have to do that. Well, we're probably going to have to shorten the show up a little bit. We're starting to run over an
yeah.
hour.
We can talk all night. So we'll
Yep.
doing it again next week. We got plenty more topics to discuss. Well, the stringer record thing, and of course next week's rivalry week. So we'll be talking about the game and the Iron Bowl and all that, and what's going to look like going to championship week. So, but hey, big shout out to Jeremiah and John. Appreciate you guys. You had a lot of great things to say and joining in the conversation. Absolutely awesome. Whoever you're a fan of, it's awesome. I'm just I don't hate people. I hate Michigan. The team, not the people, not the fans, the team. And I root for two teams, Ohio State and whoever's plays Michigan that week. That's the two teams I root for. So
Yeah.
um,
So tomorrow we have the biggest game around this area. Obviously, Ohio State, Indiana. I have Ohio State 34, Indiana 17.
oh man, you got thrown out a number. I'm gonna see here. Might as well put that back up. I'm not gonna be able to put out a number because it's against my Ohio State religion to throw out anything against Ohio State or for Ohio State. I feel like it's a jinx, so I'm just gonna say dominate the line of scrimmage and have a heck of a game and come out with a victory. I don't care what the score is.
Well, 34-17, and the only reason they have 17 is because they get a late score, with a minute to go or something, a meaningless touchdown or something. That's the only reason
Yeah.
that they even get 17 points.
If I had to guess the way it's going to go, what's happened with Ohio State this year quite a bit is the other team jumps out early, either a field goal or a touchdown, and then Ohio State, makes some adjustments to see what they're doing on offense, and then they tend to, in the second, third quarter, catch up, pull away. One thing Ohio State's been really good this year is red zone defense, and more so is red zone offense. They're scoring touchdowns more than field goals, so that they need to do that tomorrow, and to get out on top of Indiana, mainly I think to kill any hopes they had that they were going to be able to compete. But the line of scrimmage wins, and if they're going to go as far as the line of scrimmage can take them. Either team, so we'll see what happens. I'm happy for Indiana, I really am. I love to see the Big Ten get some more teams in here that are going to matter. I hope Signetti looks like he's going to stick around. He's got a boatload of money in his boat now.
Yeah,
So
well, they're going to come crashing back to earth tomorrow.
and you were talking about LSU. I wanted to mention real quick. He lost his number one recruit back to Michigan for $13.5 million. Apparently, Brian Kelly didn't want to pay him
It's
that.
not friggin' unbelievable.
I know.
I'd
I
seen,
know.
who was it? The quarterback that's going to Colorado, he flipped from.
USC.
No,
Yeah,
I thought it was one of,
Trojans. Yeah,
I
the
thought it was one of
Trojans.
the, I thought it was one of the SEC schools.
No, it was the Trojans. It was Lincoln Riley had a dude. He
Julian,
flipped
whatever his name is.
Julian Lewis, I think.
Yeah, Julian Lewis,
Yeah,
exactly. So
flipped him to prime time. So he's going to be taking over for Shador Sanders as he goes to the pro. I was calling that Dion's going to go to Dallas. Dallas is going to be the worst team, highest in the draft that needs a quarterback, and they'll take his son, and it'll just be a crazy show for another decade of turmoil as they all make millions of dollars and don't win anything. But that was just my guess. I guess I'm wrong.
yeah,
So,
freaking
nonetheless, we appreciate the two guys chiming in, John and Jeremiah. We hope to see you next week about 9 o'clock right here. Whether you join on the Facebook or YouTube, thumbs up on Facebook, hit the bell, subscribe on YouTube, and like us, join us, subscribe us, get the word out, get some more people in here talking football, and that's what we want to do. We want to talk football. We're talking, so you can join us and talk with us. So until next week, I am Fletch. He is Randy, right?
We got it.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.